The soft hum of quantum processors filled the sterile corridors of Google's Quantum Research Division in Mountain View, California. It was March 2035, and Dr. Mai Lin stood before the massive quantum computer array that had consumed 5 years of her life. The cryogenic chambers glowed with an ethereal blue light housing qubits that could process information in ways classical computers never could. "Final calibration complete," announced her colleague Dr. Alex Rivera, reading from his tablet. "The mortality oracle is ready for testing." Mai Lin nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the dancing lights of the quantum cores. At 35, she had dedicated her career to bridging the gap between quantum mechanics and practical applications. The mortality oracle represented the pinnacle of that ambition, a quantum computer capable of analyzing biological data, genetic markers, environmental factors, and lifestyle patterns to predict a person's date of death with unprecedented accuracy. "Remember," Mai Lin said to her team of 12 researchers gathered around the central console, "this isn't about playing God. We're creating a tool that could revolutionize preventive medicine, help people make informed life choices, and ultimately save lives." Emily Tran, the team's psychology consultant, shifted uncomfortably. "The ethical implications are still—" "We've been through this, Emily," interrupted Robert Chen, Google's chief financial officer, who had arrived unannounced. His polished suit and predatory smile made him look out of place among the lab coats. "The board has invested $2 billion in this project. The potential market value is astronomical." Mai Lin felt her jaw tighten. Chen had been pushing for accelerated testing despite her concerns about the psychological impact on test subjects. "Mr. Chen, we agreed to proceed cautiously. The algorithm is still being refined." "Caution doesn't improve quarterly earnings," Chen replied, his voice carrying an edge of authority. "We go live in 6 weeks. The marketing team is already preparing the campaign." The room fell silent except for the quantum computer's constant humming. Mai Lin knew that arguing would be futile. Chen held too much sway with the board. But she also knew that rushing this technology to market could have devastating consequences. "Fine," she said finally. "But we run the beta test on the development team first. If we're going to unleash this on the world, we need to understand its effects ourselves." Chen's smile widened. "Excellent. I'll expect a full report by Monday." After Chen left, the team worked in tense silence. The mortality oracle consumed dozens of data points, genetic sequences, medical histories, lifestyle factors, environmental exposure, psychological profiles, and even subtle biometric patterns invisible to conventional analysis. The quantum processor could identify correlations and patterns across millions of variables, simultaneously creating predictions with a claimed accuracy rate of 99.7%. 3 days later, Mai Lin stood alone in the lab at midnight, staring at the input terminal. She had run the test on each team member, delivering results that ranged from reassuring Dr. Rivera had another 62 years to sobering Emily. Tran would likely succumb to early-onset Alzheimer's in 31 years. But she had saved her own test for last, afraid of what she might discover. Taking a deep breath, she placed her palm on the biometric scanner and watched as the quantum processor began its analysis. Genetic data cascaded across screens. Environmental factors were calculated. Lifestyle patterns emerged in complex visualizations. The machine hummed louder, qubits dancing in superposition as they processed the quantum calculations necessary for such a prediction. Then the screen went dark. A single line of text appeared. Predicted expiration date September 12, 2035. Confidence level 99.7%. Mai Lin's knees nearly buckled. 6 months. According to the most advanced computer ever built, she had 6 months to live. The next morning, she arrived at the lab to find Emily already at work, analyzing the psychological profiles of test subjects from the beta group. "How are you feeling about your results?" Emily asked without looking up. Mai Lin forced a smile. "Liberating in a way. 68 years is a good run. Emily glanced at her sharply. I've seen the quantum processor logs, Mai. Your test ran last night. There was no point in lying. 6 months, Mai Lin said quietly. Emily's face went pale. That's impossible. You're healthy, you exercise, you have no family history of major diseases. The algorithm doesn't lie, Mai Lin interrupted, though her voice lacked conviction. That's what makes it so valuable. It sees patterns we can't. Over the following weeks, as the team prepared for the public beta, Mai Lin threw herself into verifying the algorithm's predictions. She consulted with Dr. Alex Rivera about genetic factors she might have missed, underwent extensive medical testing, and even sought a second opinion from specialists outside Google. Every test came back normal. She was in perfect health. Yet the mortality oracle remained adamant. September 12, 2035. The doubt began as a whisper in the back of her mind. What if there was an error? What if the 0.3% margin of error wasn't random, but systematic? She began diving deeper into the quantum calculations, analyzing the raw data that fed into the algorithm. Meanwhile, Chen's marketing machine had begun its work. Leaked information about the mortality oracle spread across social media, generating unprecedented buzz. The promise of knowing one's death date with near-perfect accuracy captured the global imagination. Some saw it as the ultimate self-knowledge, others as humanity's greatest folly. Jake Sullivan, a technology journalist for Wired, was the first to break the story publicly. His article, Google's Death Clock, the Quantum Computer That Knows When You'll Die, went viral within hours. Suddenly, the entire world was talking about the mortality oracle. The beta launch was moved up to capitalize on the media attention. Chen had convinced the board that they were sitting on the most revolutionary consumer technology since the smartphone. Google's stock price soared on speculation alone. But as the first 1,000 beta users received their predictions, a disturbing pattern emerged. A significant number of people who received death dates within the year began exhibiting signs of severe depression and anxiety. 3 beta testers in Japan attempted suicide after learning their predicted death dates. 2 succeeded. Emily Tran brought these findings to Mai Lin's attention. We're seeing a phenomenon I'm calling predictive mortality syndrome, she explained, showing charts of psychological evaluation data. When people believe they're going to die soon, their entire worldview collapses. They stop eating properly, neglect medical care, withdraw from social connections. In some cases, they're essentially willing themselves to death. Mai Lin stared at the data, her own 6-month deadline weighing heavily on her mind. How many? 17% of beta users with death dates within 2 years are showing severe symptoms. But here's the disturbing part. Some of them are actually developing health problems that align with their predicted causes of death. Heart patients are experiencing increased cardiac stress. Cancer-prone individuals are showing elevated inflammatory markers. That's impossible, Mai Lin said. The algorithm predicts based on biological predisposition, not behavior. Unless, Emily said carefully, the prediction itself is changing the outcome. We might be creating a self-fulfilling prophecy on a massive scale. That night, Mai Lin couldn't sleep. She returned to the lab and began a deep dive into the quantum algorithms that powered the mortality oracle. What she found made her blood run cold. Buried in the code were subtle adjustments that had been made without the team's knowledge, modifications that seemed designed to amplify certain predictions while suppressing others. The changes had Chen's digital signature. She spent the next week tracing the modifications, creating a parallel version of the algorithm without Chen's alterations. When she ran her own data through the unmodified system, she got a very different result, a predicted death date of March 15, 2067, 32 years in the future, well within normal life expectancy. But Chen's version consistently produced the 6-month deadline. Further investigation revealed the scope of the manipulation. Chen hadn't just altered individual predictions, he had systematically skewed the algorithm to create more dramatic results, believing that controversy and strong emotional reactions would drive engagement and profit. People weren't interested in dying of old age at 85. They wanted shocking revelations, dramatic deadlines, life-changing predictions. Mai Lin realized she had to act. But Chen had significant power within Google, and accusing him of manipulating the system would require ironclad proof and perfect timing. The opportunity came 2 weeks later, during a massive press conference that Google had organized to officially launch the Mortality Oracle to the public. The event was held at the Moscone Center in San Francisco, with hundreds of journalists, tech industry leaders, and government officials in attendance. Chen took the stage first, presenting the Mortality Oracle as humanity's greatest technological achievement. Today, he declared, we're giving people the ultimate gift, knowledge of their own mortality. This isn't about fear. It's about empowerment. When you know your deadline, you can truly live. He showed carefully selected testimonials from beta users who had received reassuring predictions decades in the future. The audience was captivated by stories of people who had changed their lives for the better after learning they had time to pursue their dreams. Then, Mai Lin was introduced to explain the technical aspects of the system. She walked onto the stage, her heart pounding, carrying a tablet loaded with her research. The Mortality Oracle. She began, represents a breakthrough in quantum computing and predictive modeling. However, I stand before you today, not just as its creator, but as someone who has discovered a fundamental flaw in the system as it currently operates. A murmur rippled through the audience. Chen, sitting in the front row, shot her a warning look. Mai Lin continued. When we first developed this technology, our goal was to provide accurate health predictions to help people live better lives. But I've discovered that the version being released to the public has been deliberately modified to produce more dramatic results. She turned to the large screen behind her and began displaying the evidence she had gathered. These modifications create what I call quantum noise, intentional distortions in the algorithm that affect approximately 0.3% of predictions. This noise doesn't just create false positives. It can actually influence the outcomes it predicts. The room erupted. Journalists began shouting questions. Chen stood up, his face red with rage. Dr. Lin is suffering from a psychological breakdown, he announced loudly. She received an unfavorable prediction and has been attempting to discredit the system ever since. Mr. Chen, Mai Lin said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Is that why you modified the algorithm to ensure my death prediction would be dramatic enough to serve as a marketing tool? She displayed Chen's digital signature on the code modifications, showing how he had specifically targeted her data to create the 6-month deadline. The audience fell silent as the implications became clear. You used me as a test case, Mai Lin continued, believing that if the creator of the system accepted her own death sentence, it would lend credibility to the product. But you didn't just predict my death, you tried to program it. Chen stormed toward the stage, security guards moving to intercept him. You signed the same NDAs as everyone else, he shouted. This is corporate sabotage. This is about preventing a global mental health crisis, Mai Lin shot back. The unmodified algorithm shows that I have 32 years left to live, not 6 months. How many of our beta users are living under a false death sentence because you wanted to increase engagement metrics? The press conference descended into chaos. Videos of the confrontation went viral within hours. Google's stock price plummeted as investors realized the scandal's implications. Government investigations were launched in multiple countries. The Mortality Oracle was immediately pulled from the market. Over the following weeks, the full extent of Chen's manipulations came to light. A forensic analysis of the code revealed that he had systematically altered approximately 12% of predictions to create more interesting results. The modifications were designed to increase user engagement and social media sharing, turning life and death predictions into viral content. Chen was arrested on charges of computer fraud and reckless endangerment. It emerged that he had been selling data from the modified predictions to insurance companies and pharmaceutical firms who were using the information to adjust policies and drug development strategies. Mai Lin found herself at the center of a global controversy. She had saved countless lives by exposing the fraud, but she had also shattered public trust in quantum prediction technology. The ethical implications of knowing one's death date, even with perfect accuracy, remained unresolved. 3 months after the press conference, Google announced a complete overhaul of the Mortality Oracle project. Mai Lin was appointed as the new director, with a mandate to develop an ethical version of the technology. Working with Emily Tran and Dr. Rivera, she designed a new system called the Wellness Oracle. Instead of predicting death dates, it focused on health optimization, providing personalized medical recommendations, diet suggestions, and lifestyle modifications to extend healthy lifespan. The quantum computer's processing power was redirected toward identifying early signs of disease and recommending preventive treatments. The new system deliberately obscured specific timelines, instead offering ranges and probabilities. It emphasized hope and action rather than fatalism and acceptance. Most importantly, it included built-in safeguards against the kind of manipulation Chen had implemented. Mai Lin resigned from her research position 6 months after the press conference, ironically, exactly when Chen's algorithm had predicted she would die. But instead of death, she chose a new life. She founded the Institute for Ethical Prediction Technology, a non-profit organization dedicated to helping people cope with technological predictions about their future. The institute offered counseling for those who had been affected by the corrupted Mortality Oracle, developed ethical guidelines for prediction technology, and worked with governments to regulate the use of quantum computing in healthcare. On September 12, 2035, the date Chen's algorithm had marked for her death, Mai Lin stood once again in the Google Quantum Lab, now transformed into a more open collaborative space. The massive quantum computers still hummed, but their purpose had changed. Instead of predicting death, they were working to extend life. Dr. Rivera approached her carrying a tablet, showing the latest results from the Wellness Oracle. "The system is performing beautifully," he said. "We're identifying health risks an average of 15 years earlier than conventional medicine. Early intervention is increasing life expectancy across our user base." Mai Lin smiled, but her expression remained thoughtful. "Alex, do you ever wonder if we should have the power to predict the future at all, even for good reasons?" "Every day," he admitted. "But I think the question isn't whether we should have the power, we already do. The question is how we choose to use it." Emily Tran joined them, having just finished a session with a support group for former Mortality Oracle users. "I've been thinking about that too," she said. "Maybe the real gift isn't knowing when we'll die, but knowing that we don't know. That uncertainty is what makes each day precious." As the 3 colleagues stood watching the quantum computers work to improve human health, rather than predict human death, Mai Lin reflected on the journey that had brought them there. The technology, that had once seemed like humanity's greatest achievement, had become its greatest cautionary tale. The morning news played on a screen in the corner, showing updates from around the world. The Mortality Oracle scandal had sparked a global conversation about the ethics of prediction technology. Some countries had banned quantum life prediction entirely, while others were developing strict regulatory frameworks. Jake Sullivan, the journalist who had first broken the story, had published a book about the scandal called The Oracle Effect: How Google's Death Machine Changed the World. In interviews, he often quoted Mai Lin's final words from the press conference: "The future isn't meant to be known, it's meant to be created." The sun was setting over Mountain View as Mai Lin prepared to leave the lab. She thought about the thousands of people who had been affected by Chen's manipulations, the families torn apart by false predictions, the lives cut short by self-fulfilling prophecies. But she also thought about the medical breakthroughs that had emerged from their work, the diseases caught early, the lives extended. As she walked to her car, Mai Lin's phone buzzed with a message from the Wellness Oracle. It wasn't predicting her death; that function had been permanently disabled. Instead, it suggested that she get more sleep, drink more water, and maybe take a vacation. Simple advice, but honest advice. She looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, quantum computers in labs around the world were processing data, finding patterns, making predictions. The technology would continue to evolve, and with it, humanity's relationship with its own future. But Mai Lin had learned something valuable through her experience with the mortality oracle. The most important predictions weren't about when life would end, but about how it could be improved. The future wasn't a destination to be reached, but a path to be walked one day at a time with all the uncertainty and possibility that entailed. As she drove home, Mai Lin thought about tomorrow. She didn't know what it would bring, and for the first time in months, that uncertainty felt like a gift. The mortality oracle had taught humanity a harsh lesson about the double-edged nature of knowledge. Some truths once known could not be unknown. Some futures once predicted could not be unchanged. But in learning to live with uncertainty, people had rediscovered the value of hope, the importance of the present moment, and the responsibility that came with technological power. The quantum computers would continue their work processing endless streams of data, finding patterns in the chaos of human existence. But they would do so with new constraints, new purposes, and new respect for the complexity of human life. Mai Lin had survived her predicted death date, not because she had cheated death, but because she had refused to let a machine define her fate. In the end, the most powerful quantum computer ever built had been defeated by the most analog of human traits, the will to reject predetermined destiny and create one's own future. The institute she had founded continued to grow, helping people navigate an increasingly predictive world while maintaining their agency and hope. The Wellness Oracle became a model for ethical AI, showing how powerful technology could be used to enhance human life without becoming a source of existential dread. Years later, when people looked back on the Mortality Oracle scandal, they would remember it as a turning point, the moment when humanity realized that some knowledge was too dangerous to seek, and that the greatest wisdom lay not in knowing the future, but in having the courage to face it unknown. And in her small office at the Institute for Ethical Prediction Technology, Dr. Mai Lin continued her work helping others find hope in uncertainty and meaning in the mystery of human existence. The quantum computers hummed on, but they hummed a different tune now, one of possibility rather than inevitability, of hope rather than fatalism. The future remained unwritten, and that was exactly as it should be.